Welcome, welcome, welcome in, everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with Carepatrol, where education is the heart of everything we do. We appreciate you joining us on this overcast Monday, and we have a terrific topic today. We're so blessed to be joined again by Pamela Strickland of Medicaid Application Processing Services and by Bill Nolan of the Alabama Elder Care Law Firm. And each of them are, I think, without question, Medicaid experts. We petitioned folks through the month, this month, for questions for Bill and Pamela to answer. And so those will be the questions that we answer today. However, I do want you to feel comfortable in asking your question. So if you came today with a question in mind, please do add your voice to ours. I know that when you do, everyone is blessed by having alternate opinions and other folks' opinions and your opinion. So thank you for that. I, again, have to apologize. My camera's not working. As I told Bill and Pamela, I actually am cleaned and combed and dressed for the appropriateness of the situation. However, I'm not visible. Doesn't matter. What is visible are Bill and Pamela. They're on your screen. And if you are new with us, let's do some housekeeping real quickly. And first of all, if you're new with us, you may not know who Carepatrol is. We are an aging care navigation company. And what that means is that we find clients or referred clients call us who are somewhere generally in their healthcare and wellness journey. We help them understand what the guideposts are up ahead, how to afford those, how to qualify for those, and what makes the most sense. And sometimes that is moving into a senior care community, at which time we would be paid. At all other times, we do our work pro bono. We're happy to do it, and we are blessed by the work, and we appreciate the work that you do as clinicians here. As you may know, if you've been with us before, we encourage discussion. And one of you is unmuted, it looks like. Let me see who it is. Gwen Gay. There you go. Okay. So anyway, folks, we encourage discussion. If you please make note of your mic if it's on or off. You can also, if you're not comfortable speaking on the presentation or speaking aloud, you can use the chat room. If you're new to Zoom and you need to find the chat room or unmute your mic, take your cursor and move it up to the top of your screen or down to the bottom of your screen, and a black bar will appear. Mute as a word and an icon will be, a microphone will be there, and then there'll be a start video, there'll be other things, but that's how you unmute. There's also the word chat, so you can join in the chat. And good afternoon, Miss Durzis, Miss Chestnut, and Miss Friend. Thank you for already joining in the conversation. Those of you who have been with us before know that you have to complete a evaluation in order to receive a certificate for this hour. Social workers and nurses receive certificates. Nurses, we post on the website for you. The evaluation is on SurveyMonkey. And I will read that address for those of you who are participating by phone or unable to see the screen. Please make note that today's evaluation, which is a SurveyMonkey evaluation, is at https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/all uppercase letters, V as in victory, 893R2F. I have posted that into the chat room for those of you who've just joined as well. I'll read it one more time in case you missed it. The survey evaluation today is located at https://www surveymonkey.com/r/V as in victory 893R2F. Hello, Ms. Bowers. Hello, Ms. Kimbrough. Thank you all for being here. Those are our housekeeping items. As you know, our evaluation is password protected. We'll be giving that out at the end of today's presentation. Let's look at our objectives and then we'll get started. First, our objective under Medicaid questions answered by Pamela Strickland and Bill Nolan is we're going to discuss in different scenarios, or really they are, different scenarios that involve asset protection when applying for Medicaid. Objective 2 will be to discuss with you and among ourselves the process of switching from community Medicaid to institutional Medicaid. And then lastly, objective 3, we're going to discuss the process of obtaining Medicaid upon moving to the state of Alabama. Is it possible to do so? Again, we encourage discussion, your questions in the chat room or via the mic, and we hope that you will join us, and we're really excited about getting started. So as I said earlier, the questions were asked throughout the month, but we do want you to submit your own. Oh, big waiting room. Excuse me, y'all. Okay. Question number 1 is there a way for skilled nursing facilities to check a person's assets prior to admission if coming in Medicaid pending? Is there a website? Pamela or Bill?
Yep. Well, the skilled nursing facility will request the family of the person being admitted to the nursing home to supply them with various documents. And those would be bank statements, proof of any asset that they own, which could be anything from CDs to annuities to home ownership, car ownership. So they get that information from the family. There's no certain website they go to and punch in a social security number and get the assets. That is supplied by the family, and they do check that. So when I'm helping a family and I have that information, I always combine that in a report for the nursing home so that they will know the resources of the family. Sometimes the Medicaid pending process takes 30 to 45 days. And by Medicaid standards in the state of Alabama, you must be in a facility for 30 days before you can be Medicaid pending. That 30 days also includes hospital time, rehab time, and then time in the facility itself. If that time is not broken up, it must be straight from the hospital to rehab to the nursing home. So to be considered Medicaid pending, you have to have 30 days in a facility, and then we during that 30-day period, if that's what we're waiting on, we get all the asset information together. And if there's an over-resource, we take care of that by doing an Alabama Family Trust, referring that out as need be, depending upon what those over-resourced assets are.
And just for my edification, over-resourced means what?
Over-resourced means that you have more money, more assets, more liquid money than Medicaid allows you to have. For you to be Medicaid pending, the individual going into the nursing home can have no more than $2,000 to their name. I prefer it to be $1,900 just to be sure, but that's everything. I mean, we're talking, there can be, unless it's a stream of income, There can be no CDs, no savings accounts, anything like that. You have to be below $2,000 if you're single. If you are married, the spouse can keep a certain amount of money, usually 1/2 of the amount that you have. And the person going into the nursing home must spend down their half to $2,000 or below, or B, place that money into an Alabama Family Trust to get the Medicaid pending. Does that answer your question, Sean?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you so much. I think we've addressed that. Let's look at what happens when an individual goes into nursing home care and applies for Medicaid and has a large insurance policy with beneficiaries.
Great question. First of all, it depends on the type of policies. Medicaid doesn't look so much at term policies, but they do look at whole life policies. Why? Because whole life has a face value that you can borrow against. It has equity in it. You can go in and get that stream of money out of it. And so Medicaid pretty much makes you cash in all whole life policies over and above $5,000. And that is because they can be another stream of an asset or an income that you can draw out of. And so Medicaid makes you cash those in. Term policies, on the other hand, they don't really look at those at all. If you've got term policy, you're fine. I mean, that's going to run out at a certain term anyway. If it, like, for instance, I have a client whose term policy is going to end, which means go away after they paid all this money to it when he reaches 78. And that's $1 million policy. And it's just going to go away because he's outlived his policy. He's not going to get anything from that policy if he lives to 79. So Medicaid doesn't look at term policies. But now when it comes to estate issues, and Bill, you can certainly address this as you do probate. When it comes to estate issues and there's money owed Medicaid and there is money left by an insurance policy, and there is no beneficiary and it goes to the estate, that's a totally different issue. Bill, have you had that happen?
Yeah, that's a good point. When a person has a life insurance policy, whether it's whole life, term, variable, Medicaid isn't really concerned about policies like term policies, that have no cash value. But they're not going to allow the Medicaid applicant's income to be used to keep those premiums paid currently, unless Pam tells me otherwise. I mean,
No, that's correct.
Medicaid has a claim, a priority to all of that income, or the nursing home would be the person's copay to the nursing home, and Medicaid pays the difference. And so Medicaid's not going to allow a couple of $100 a month to just go out to pay State Farm or Liberty National or whatever. So in many cases, the kids have to do the math and say, well, gosh, Dad's got this policy and it's costing us a couple of $100, costing him a couple of $100 a month. Medicaid's not going to let his money be used. Should we just pick up the premiums and keep it going, knowing that we're the beneficiaries? Well, it might make sense. You just have to do the math and see how much you might have to kick in versus how much you might get back in return. As for probate, when a person has a beneficiary named under their policy and the beneficiary predeceases the person, the owner of the policy, that money is part of his or her estate and would be used to satisfy any bequest to family, friends, heirs, people like that. But creditors, including Medicaid, have a priority claim against the estate before the kids or anybody else gets a dime. So if you do have a policy and it does name a person as beneficiary and that person predeceases the owner of the policy, that money may be Medicaid's. That's why it's important, I think, to have a power of attorney, which ours have this, that give the agent of the Medicaid applicant the authority to make beneficiary changes to any asset the person has, whether it's an IRA, 401k, or a life insurance policy. That way, they can change the beneficiary, name somebody else, and avoid it becoming an asset of the estate. Sorry to have gone off on a tangent like that.
No, that's perfect. Exactly what I wanted you to do. Yes, please.
Excellent, y'all. Let's go with at death. Does the beneficiary have to pay whatever is owed to Medicaid for the person's care and keep the rest?
That's a good question. And I think what that question is assuming is, does Medicaid, in fact, have some sort of lien on the policy amount? And they don't. You know, if I own a policy and let's say I've paid it up, it's a paid up policy. I don't owe any premiums anymore. And it's a term policy, meaning it's going to be good for a certain term and then it goes away. And I have a friend named as beneficiary. Medicaid doesn't have any claim to that policy. It's not an asset that I can ever access because it doesn't become an asset until after my death. And the beneficiary of that policy is not on Medicaid, so Medicaid doesn't have a claim to their asset. So if the facts stack up just right, that is, if the policy's paid up or is kept current by somebody else, and the beneficiary is out there and they receive this payout at death, that passes outside of the probate estate. Medicaid doesn't have a claim to it, unless Pam tells me something different.
Yep, that's right.
With some good news.
Yeah, that's some good news.
All right, here's one. What if a person is only institutionalized for 6 months and then they die? With the sale of the home, who gets whatever the amount is above what Medicaid has paid to the nursing home for those 6 months?
Well, do they have a will? And how is the house left in the will? Or B, is there a co-owner to the home? Is there a life estate? There are a lot of different answers to this question. And I think Bill would be the better one to answer this, because if it is left in a will and it goes to the children, and there is a caregiver living in the home that is a child, that home doesn't have to be sold until the child caregiver sells the home or moves out or whatever they do. I mean, so there's a lot of different ways to answer this, but the basic answer is whomever the house is left after they pay Medicaid back, whomever is left the house. But Bill, I know you've gone through this with probate. So how have you seen this?
Well, if there's a will, the house, or actually the value of the house over and above what Medicaid is entitled to, would go to whoever's named in the will as a beneficiary. If there is no will, Medicaid would get their share first, and then the rest of the money would go to the deceased person's next of kin, and that's determined by Alabama law. Usually it's the children's spouse, grandchildren, people like that. Medicaid doesn't have a claim to any more than they are owed at the time of death, so they couldn't take it all under any circumstances.
But I want to be clear, Pamela. You said that if the child in the home was a caregiver, they could remain in the home.
Yeah.
I knew that was true for a dependent child. I did not know that was true for the caregiver.
Yeah, if the caregiver who took care of the institutionalized person for like 3 years, and this is their home, this is where they live, and if they have nowhere else to go, and it must be a child. See, it must be a child,
Sibling or a child.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Sibling
Bill.
or a child.
Sibling. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, sibling or child. They can stay in that home until they die, or until they sell it, move on. But when they sell that home, the portion that Medicaid has a lien for gets paid, and then the remainder goes as per the deed or the will, or how it's passed.
That's
Is 3 years the minimum that they have to live there?
Particular.
Yes.
2 years for a child, 1 year for a sibling.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 years for a child, 1 year for a sibling. That is so interesting. I'm so glad I know that.
Mm-hmm.
How
Used to
many
be,
houses
Sean,
can a person have?
Sean, it used to be that they would let you deed the house outright to the caregiver.
Is that right?
And then it's just they're at it. But I don't know when they changed it 3 or 4 years ago. Now they basically give it to the caregiver, but the caregiver couldn't turn around and sell it and profit from it. They get to live there, but that's all. Have a roof over. I'm not sure when they changed the law, but they did. It didn't make it quite as nice for caregiving kids.
That's an important question too. What have there been any significant changes to Alabama Medicaid that we should be aware of?
Oh, that is a good one. Pam could probably tell you better than I could on that.
You know, they Alabama Medicaid has not made major changes in the rules as far as filing, those types of things. What they have done is made some changes in the past, let's say 5 years, for long-term care insurance policies. They now look at those, and there's very special language. I don't have it in front of me, and I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting this question, but I can get that. But there is some very specific language that can be used for long-term care policies and Medicaid, so that those policies can be used, and Medicaid considers those as a good thing, not so much a bad thing anymore. So there is some language with that, and I'll try to find that, Sean, and send that to you. But it's still just as strict as ever. I've not seen a huge amount of change, except for one thing, and that is requesting checks and statements. Medicaid goes online and requests balances for 60 months for the first day of each month. And now, instead of requesting all 60 months up front, which they do not do now, they watch the ebbs and flows of the bank statements, and then they request certain bank statements, like the quarter before and the quarter after, that ebb and flow that they want to look at. So you may get 3 bank statements from 4 years ago, 2 from 2 years ago, and then all of the current year. That may be the only thing that they request. So I no longer tell my clients you'll get 60 months of bank statements. I let Medicaid tell me what they want, but I do ask them to get 12 months of bank statements.
Again, glad to know it, because I've been telling people 60 months.
Yeah. No.
We've said this before, and I'll say it one more time in case we have a new person on board. Medicaid is incredibly proficient at finding transfers. So there's absolutely no reason anybody should try to pull one over on Medicaid, because they're not going to be successful. They're going to get caught. Their application is going to get rejected, and it's just not worth it. I mean, and I think the application is a sworn application anyway, so you might be used to being of committing fraud in the process. So there's nothing good that can come of misleading Medicaid at all. Just don't do it.
And let me share this. This has actually happened to me. I filed for a family who had quite a bit of money, and they had spent down a lot of money, and we had put a lot of the money into the Alabama Family Trust. So all was copacetic, and we filed the Medicaid application. And I got a call about a month later from the Medicaid worker, and she said these words to me. She said, "Ms. Strickland, do you realize that the son moved $1.8 million from the Schwab account into their own name before you filed?" I had no idea. So I got the son on the line, and he said these words. I did not think you would find that. Do you know what that is? That's a $650,000 fine and a 10-year prison sentence. Unless he gives the money back. And of course he gave the money back. But these are things that, we file and we think that we've got everything in line, and then Medicaid, man, they find things. So just be aware.
Well, that leads to our next question. How many houses could they find of ours could we have if we were to qualify for Medicaid?
They can find all of them.
But how many
Let me tell you.
can a person have? Just one?
One, I mean, there are families that have like a beach home and then they have a home. And that beach home may be held by 6 kids and they're a 1/6 owner, where those other 5 children need to buy out that 1/6 part of that beach house to get that person's name off of it if they're going to apply for Medicaid. And it has to be a fair market value purchase.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
You have one house, your residence, and that house is protected. It's not considered an asset in the application process itself, but Medicaid would still put a lien on it. They won't let you have vacation homes, rental homes, anything like that, and still be eligible. However, if you make a good faith effort to sell those homes, Medicaid would allow you to be approved, but they would put a lien on those rental homes or vacation homes and get their money when they do sell.
And you have to prove that you're selling them with a copy of the contract, and they want you to take pictures of the for sale sign out in front of the home, and so they do keep up with that.
And you need to sell it for fair market value, like Pam said. If you sell it to a We Buy Ugly Houses places, you're making a bargain sale, and Medicaid's going to penalize you for that.
Here, this, I guess, question, and the same person asked, will my life savings hurt me when I apply for Medicaid?
I'm sorry, but yes. That's what we put in the Alabama Family Trust 99% of the time, our life savings. And as we know, I just want to explain this, and the Alabama Family Trust is a vehicle in the state of Alabama that helps a Medicaid claimant be qualified for Medicaid as far as resources. And so we put any money in the Alabama Family Trust. Let's say we do that on March 15th. That means on April 1st, they are Medicaid qualified, and we can file for Medicaid in the month of April. It's always the first day of the next month that you set up that Alabama Family Trust. And so if you have worked hard and you have an IRA that's worth $200,000, or you have a savings account that has $200,000 in it, unfortunately, Medicaid will make you cash in the IRA, taxes and all, put that into your account, and then we will move it into the Alabama Family Trust. And you can use that money for the quality of life care over and above what Medicaid will pay for from the Alabama Family Trust. And I tell people, spend all the money, because if you don't spend it, Medicaid's going to get it. And so that could be for a private room. It could be for telephone, cable, clothing, all sorts of things.
Yeah. Caregivers, professional caregivers.
Professional caregivers, yes.
You know, Sean, this is a good classic case of why it's so important for families when they're getting up to years to talk with an elder law attorney to learn what their options might be well before Medicaid becomes a reality. Because if a person meets with a lawyer early enough, they can put some plans in place to protect their excess monthly income, and they can put plans in place to protect their accumulated assets. But when you wait until the 11th hour to do it, you've missed your boat. It's too late. So the question is, what can we do maybe 5 years before we need Medicaid? And what are the costs? What would happen if we never needed Medicaid? Well, nothing. I mean, you protected yourself, but it hadn't really cost you anything. Like buying homeowners insurance. You know, you buy homeowners insurance, pay for it every year. Don't even think about it in your mortgage. And it's rare that anybody's home burns down or a tornado blows it, unless you live, you know, in Southwest Alabama. It just doesn't happen. So, but we don't object to paying, or maybe we don't object. We don't think about it. We just assume it's an expense we have to pay. Same goes with Medicaid or elder law planning. It should be considered an expense that everybody incurs just to find out what they can protect. And if they can't protect as much as it costs, don't do it. But if they can protect a lot more, why wouldn't you do it?
Right.
Shameless pitch.
As you began that statement, Bill, Cynthia Hobdy asked us, what is the best age to transfer all assets to a dependent?
Ooh, that's a good one, because
That's a great one.
People age differently, and people's health it can vary from, age to age. Like you could be an 85-year-old healthy as a horse, or you could be a 65-year-old with advanced dementia. So it's more a condition of what's the family member's health and life expectancy rather than what age they are. I think all of us have these red flag moments, and we've talked about that before. If you look at a person's life on a continuum from birth to death, there's certain red flag moments that pop up along the way that should be considered warning signs or nudge you to do some further exploration. Like maybe one is the loss of a spouse. Okay, my husband died. Now I'm a widow. Is there anything I need to do or change about the way I've been doing things? Good question. Why don't you talk to somebody about it? Or a person's gone into the hospital because they broke their hip. Now they've come back home. They need some caregivers. Wow, that's a red flag moment. Is there anything we need to change about the way we've been living our life, and what can we do? Or a person moves from home to assisted living. Is that a big moment? Absolutely. I think you can do some exploration there. Or they have to move from assisted living to skilled care, but they're on private pay. That's another red flag moment. At each of those points in time, they're planning opportunities, but if you miss them, you've missed them forever.
Yeah.
Great. If a trust was created over 5 years ago, but funds were never deposited into the trust, does the trust meet the 5-year requirement?
Good question. And I would say there are two types of trust. There's a revocable living trust, which is by far the most common type of trust out there. And there's an irrevocable trust. Now, a revocable trust offers no Medicaid protection whatsoever. So you could set up a revocable living trust 20 years ago and fund it 20 years ago, and it still doesn't offer you any Medicaid benefit. You would have to use an irrevocable trust to get the Medicaid protection, and the Medicaid allows it because when you set the trust up, you're saying, I'm conveying all of my assets to this trust, and from this moment forward, I don't have any control over those assets. I don't get any benefit from those assets. They're no longer my assets. So you're actually conveying your assets to the trustee of that trust. You have to convey the asset out of your name or you haven't given up control. So setting up the trust is certainly step one, but funding the trust is critical to starting the Medicaid clock ticking. Now, I will say this, if you sign a deed conveying your house to the trust and you don't record that deed, but the deed's been signed by you and notarized and somebody's holding that deed, that oftentimes will suffice for Medicaid application purposes, because when you sign a deed, you're conveying your interest away at that moment, even if you still hold on to the deed, even if it hadn't been recorded. And that's the way Medicaid seems to look at it. Like, well, he signed it, he gave his interest away, but I wouldn't count on that. I mean, I would record it to be on the safe side.
Yeah, and that's called a pocket deed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's called a pocket deed. Yeah.
Pocket deed. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you just get it signed, put it in your, the guy puts it in his pocket and that's it. And he never records it, but they take the date of the signing. But Medicaid is getting much stricter about recording.
Yeah, and well, they should, because you could tear that deed up and nobody knew it existed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Medicaid's doing the right thing there.
Right. Cheryl Clayball asked, how does a reverse mortgage affect getting approved for Medicaid?
Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Reverse mortgages are a nightmare for a lot of us who do this planning and all. A reverse mortgage simply says that you're taking your equity out of the home, and upon your death, the company pretty much owns your home. So you don't have any equity. I mean, you basically have a loan against your home for the value that they give to that home. A lot of times it's a lot less value than what the home is actually worth. But I've had people approved many times with reverse mortgages. I send them the paperwork, highlight certain paragraphs for them, and they work with them and they understand what these reverse mortgages are. And for a lot of people, it's a good thing. They need that money to care for their loved one. They take that money and they pay caregivers. They put them in nursing homes. They do a lot of good with that money. But they will ask, where did that money go and what did you spend it on?
Okay.
Also, it's important to note here, Sean, that the contractual obligations that come with a reverse mortgage are that the homeowner will live in the house the rest of their life. And when they vacate that house, the reverse mortgage comes due, even if they're still alive. The loan is accelerated. It comes due when the person moves out. So if a person does a reverse mortgage with the intent of using the money to pay for long-term care in a nursing home, well, that's not the proper use of that money, unless they're married and one of the spouses is living in the home and the other is in a nursing home, because the loan will come due and you got to figure out how to settle up with the lender in 6 months. And that can be hard.
Penny Wilson is asking, how does a person qualify for Medicaid if they are self-employed? I recently had a home visit with a family that all had full community Medicaid and lived in a $300,000 house and had 2 very expensive vehicles. Do they look at tax records but not assets?
They qualify by, first of all, if a married couple, they will take their assets on what we call a snapshot date. That is the date one that the claimant or the person going to be institutionalized went into the hospital, and from the hospital went to rehab, or went from the hospital to the nursing home. There was not a break in the institutionalized person's time. It went from hospital to nursing home. So let's say they spent a month in the hospital, a month of rehab, and now they're in the nursing home. So they look at the date they went into the hospital, or B, the date they went into the nursing home, and that's called a snapshot date. They look at all of the assets as of that date. And then they take those assets and they split them 50-50. The institutionalized spouse gets 50%, and the home or the community spouse gets 50%. So what do you do with the 50% that come to the institutionalized spouse? Well, there are certain spend downs we can do. If they had nursing care, they had medical costs, we can back those out. But we have to spend down that money or put that money in the Alabama Family Trust to get that spouse under the $2,000 asset limit. That means cashing in their IRA or a portion of the IRA, their portion. It could be cashing in annuities or making those annuities a stream of income. And then we, Medicaid compliant annuity. There's a lot of different planning that goes into that. As far as being a self-employed, if you're going on Medicaid, you're still not going to be self-employed. I mean, you're to the point now where you can't work and take care of yourself. And if they have Medicaid, like a home waiver or a community, that just simply means that they have passed the muster for getting those Medicaid benefits. But when you apply for institutionalized Medicaid, totally different ballgame. And you have to follow those rules. And it starts a whole new application, and much stricter for institutionalized Medicaid. Did I answer that? Okay.
Well, she says these are young people who have an eligible child. I think she's asking more along the lines of how in the world can this happen? Because here are 2 people living with a dependent child, all 3 of whom are on Medicaid in a nice house with 2 cars.
I cannot answer that.
Yeah, I never, ever see clients who need home-based Medicaid, community-based Medicaid, low-income Medicaid, because I don't know, I guess they don't have money to pay a lawyer. I don't know what it is, but we never see, the only Medicaid applicants we ever talk with are people who need long-term institutional care, nursing home care.
Yeah.
The rest of Medicaid, I'm dangerous because I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, and I don't do that either. I only do the institutionalized care.
Okay, well, that's good enough. Ms. Sharp is asking, is an adult child who was named trustee of an irrevocable trust penalized for a home left in the trust if he or she applies for Medicaid?
The trustee of the trust is serving in what they call a fiduciary capacity. the trustee of the trust doesn't own the home that's in the trust outright. The trustee owns it merely as a trustee. So it's not his home or her home. He may be serving as trustee over it, but it's not his home. So if he applies for Medicaid, it's not considered his asset.
Okay. Let's go on to our next question. I know when a couple lives at home and one has to go into the nursing home, there's a formula for determining eligibility. I also understand the community spouse can continue to live in the home, but once the community spouse dies, is the home then sold for estate recovery, even when it is willed to family?
Great question.
Yeah.
And Bill can help me here. It can go either way, because is there a will involved and is there probate involved? But basically, the house would be sold and the amount owed to Medicaid would be paid back to Medicaid. If there is no will and it goes by state law. If there is a will, and I've never had this happen, so and Bill can speak this better than I can. I would imagine that it would transfer by the will, but I would imagine that they would require. Bill, how would that go? That's a great question.
Here in Alabama, Medicaid had a new law passed a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, where every single probate case that's open in Alabama requires you to notify Medicaid of the person's death and the opening of the probate. So Medicaid has an opportunity to see if they're owed anything. And it may not be the person who's died, it may be somebody, related to that person. Even if you're a 2-year-old and you die, you still have to notify Medicaid that the person's died. And so it's crazy. Medicaid could conceivably find out about a person's death that way, and then they would file a claim against the estate and they would be paid before anybody in the family got a dime. This situation, though, is ideal for showing you why we do some of the things we do. Married couple comes in, they own their home jointly, right of survivorship, right? One of the spouses needs nursing home care, the other's in the community and she's doing great. So we might deed the house from the two of them back to the woman who's in the community, just as her house. Now, Medicaid may still file a lien against the house for the husband's care, but if he dies before she does, that lien should go away because it was never his house. It never became his house, right? That's the way it would work. If the woman's will gives the house to somebody else, then it becomes a question of, well, would Medicaid have a claim against that house or not? Because the woman was never receiving Medicaid benefits. Her assets alone shouldn't be on the hook, especially if he's already died. It can get sticky, it really can. Medicaid, of course, would claim it's their house, and our claim would be, no, it's not. We just have to see how the judge might rule on that.
We have a question in the chat room. I'm not sure if she or he is saying, is their property considered by Medicaid, or is heir, H-E-I-R property, which I'm not familiar with that term, considered by Medicaid?
I wish heir property would go away and never come back. It is such a pain in the rear for everybody. Heir property, Sean, is when grandma and grandpa own their farm out in the country. They don't have a will because who needs a will? Grandpa dies, leaves it to wife. She turns around and dies. And now their 4 kids each have a quarter interest in the property. Well, they don't do anything down the road. They each die and they leave their quarter interest to their 4 kids. So now you've got 16 people owning some small percentage of this farm out in the country, nobody having a legal right to convey it or manage it or whatever. Mm-hmm. One of those 16 goes in for nursing home care and says, I got a 16th interest in a farm in Clark County. Well, that's property. Medicaid's going to consider that to be an asset. And how is that going to be dealt with? Are the other 15 going to buy him out? Maybe, maybe not. It can be a problem. And it can also be a problem sorting it out just in, how are you going to arrive at a price and how are you going to arrive at a value and all that stuff? That's what heir property is. And it's still pretty common in Alabama.
And we all know that they're not making any more property. So when you come to do a survey and they split that out and all the kids are going, gosh, I own $80,000 worth of a quarter parcel, and then they have to buy that parcel from someone else and we don't want it. Their names aren't on it. They don't care. So yeah, it's horrible. Air property is terrible.
Oh, well, now I know a new word. I'm so glad. Fran Healy is asking in our chat room, when a person has Medicaid waiver, does the state recovery apply?
Don't know. I don't do waivers.
Yeah, that's also the community-based stuff that we don't deal with.
Ms. Huey, we'll have to find a Medicaid waiver specialist. And if any one of you on the call or on the presentation today know someone in Medicaid, community Medicaid waiver services, or work there yourselves, we'd love to have you speak.
There's a lawyer down in Dothan who's really good with this. At least I haven't seen him lately, but he used to be really good with it. Clayton Davis. I don't know if you've ever met Clayton.
I haven't. I'll ask you for his contact if you have it after the call, because I'd love to, because we've had questions about this before and I'd love to get it in front of people.
He knows a tremendous amount about the community-based stuff. He's a good speaker too.
Oh, great. Cheryl Claybaugh is asking, is there a way to do a general search for real estate in someone's name? Example, searching for air property.
Absolutely. There are two ways. You can get on your computer and go to the county of which the property is located. Type in, there's a search engine on every one of them. You can do a tax assessor search, which is the first place I would start. And it'll ask you all these things. You fill one in. You're looking for a deed and you're looking for a name. You fill that in and it will bring up hundreds. And you can just page down through there and see whom you're looking for. Or two, if you know the property specifically, you can do a title search, and a title company can do that for you. And they can tell you who owned it and then how it's passed down through the years. It's like a chain of title. So those are the two ways that you can do that. And every county in the United States does deeds. Even a parish does deeds. And you can search for names that way and get, if one person owns 3 or 4 different parcels of property or addresses, if you do a name search in a county, it will come up with all of those addresses. But if he owns property in 4 different counties, you'll need to go to each individual county to do that search.
Okay, so given that answer, does that answer satisfy Thaddeus Evans' question, which is, so with the air property, is there a look back period on it if the property was completely taken out of the prior owner's name? Example, parent's deed to property is transferred to kids and parent's name no longer on deed.
60-month look back. Would you say
Okay.
that, Bill? 5 years, if it's more than 5 years ago, but then should not be an issue.
I'll accept that. If a hospital patient already has Medicaid, I guess Medicaid waiver, but needs to go to a nursing home for the rest of their life, what is the process to switch from community Medicaid to nursing home Medicaid? How is this done if there are no involved family friends to help?
That's a great question. I deal with this a lot, and I don't know if Bill deals with this a lot, but I do. There is Medicaid for hospital. So if you go to UAB and you have no insurance, they will put you on Medicaid, boom, while you're in the hospital. And it expires the day you move out of the hospital.
Really?
Okay? Yeah. Yeah. So there's a special Medicaid for hospitals. And then you're going to transition to the institution or the nursing home. Well, you have to file long-term care. I'm sorry, you have to file institutional care Medicaid, which is what we do every day. And so how is that done? Well, you need to qualify for it just like every other person has to qualify for it. And if there's not a family member, there may be a POA that is owned by a friend or a neighbor. The POA can file. If not, social workers can refer them to a nursing home, and a nursing home can file. But a lot of times it comes to where it goes to court, and Bill can speak to this, to have a conservator and a guardian appointed, and that guardian and conservator would then go through the process of filing Medicaid.
And it's really tough too for some people in that situation, because it's tough enough for families, because a lot of older generations are really, tight-lipped about their money and their assets, and the kids don't have a clue about what mom and dad really own. But when you start getting a stranger involved, and then you get DHR, you get the county conservator involved, they don't know anything about the person's assets, income, and it becomes a detective, like a forensic case where you have to go through all of their paperwork at home and their bank accounts and credit card bills to find out, well, what are they paying for? Where is it? And so on. It can be a nightmare.
Well, let's see, where am I? How does someone who is moving to Alabama from another state qualify for Medicaid in Alabama?
Well, there could be several answers to this. The first question I have is, are they on Medicaid in the state in which they now live?
Okay.
But overall, the overarching answer is they have to qualify just like anyone else. They have to live in the state of Alabama for at least 30 days.
Okay, 30 days.
And they have to be institutionalized for at least 30 days.
Okay.
And then they apply just like anyone else applies.
Okay,
Which
so there's
means they
no
have to
other
have a
residency
power of
requirement. Just
I'm
30
sorry?
days. There's no other residency requirement, just 30 days.
Yeah.
That's good to know. In Maryland, I have colleagues who work in Maryland. Do you know what the Medicaid waiting period is there to be approved?
No.
4 years.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
No.
So we're 30 days. I mean, that's a kudos for Alabama. Well,
And also, if they are approved in another state, I just had one from California move here. They had California Medicaid, and they moved here, and I got them approved for Alabama Medicaid. And we have to completely apply like we do with anyone else, but we attach the information from California, which was the trust account from the nursing home, which had money in it, which is that $30 a month you get to keep.
Right.
They held in trust there, so we had to supply that, and anything else like we would if they were just living in Alabama. But they were in Alabama about 40 days when we got them approved.
40 days. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Kudos to you. Does anyone else have questions? We've come to the end of our presentation of the questions that had been submitted. We've got about 8 minutes. If anyone wants to add to the discussion, we'd love to hear your voice. Our survey evaluation, I'll read one more time, is at https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/all uppercase letters V as in victory 893R2F. Those are all capitalized. There is a password for today's survey, and it is the acronym for Pamela Strickland's company, which I want you to remember. Her company is Medicaid Application Processing Services, and the acronym is MAPS. That's all capital letters, capital MAPS. That is today's code word. Again, if you have questions, the contact information, thank you for reminding me, Ms. Vaughn. The contact information is right here at the end of today's presentation, which all of you who do the evaluation will receive. Ms. Martis, the video will be posted in 2 places. One will be my company website, and that is www.carepatrol.com/advisors/Shawn, SHAWN-Barnes, BARNES/. So if you go to that website, In a few days, you can both access this video as well as register for our March classes, which begin on March 10th. So we thank you all again. ABN, Ms. Friend, I should just take that out. Everyone asks, it's the Alabama Board of Nursing. It's your license number that I'm asking if you're a nurse or if you're a social worker. We are accredited by both the Alabama Boards of Nursing and Social Work. Lots of good comments, y'all. Great information, great training, great info. Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've enjoyed today and I've learned a lot, which is really just because our presenters are truly experts. And that's what we want you to think of when you think of Care Patrol, is that we are expert at what we do. And we are pleased to be able to refer to partners and friends like Pamela and Bill, who is with the Alabama Elder Care Law Firm. Bill was the first elder care attorney in our state beginning in 1982. So he is a pioneer, and he and Pamela both are truly experts. I've just put the password into the chat room, and I thank you all for being here. Bill and Pamela, thank you so much. You're so kind and gracious with your time to give to us on a frequent basis. And I'm sure we'll be asking you in again. So look in your email box.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Sean.
Y'all are welcome. Thank you. I'm going to let this meeting end, everyone. Thank you for being here. We appreciate what you do every day. We appreciate you sharing your time with us. We are Care Patrol. This is Care Concierge.